Well, thank you everyone for coming today to our workshop. Just a couple of announcements / reminders. If you haven't already signed in on the sign-in sheets outside, please do so before you head out, just so we get a good count of who's here. And then also a reminder, we have our Rebel Grad Slam finals. Friday, November 2nd from 4 to 6 in the SEB lobby. So please come and check that out if you're on campus. So today we're going to be talking about pursuing careers in academia. So let me introduce you. I'll just go ahead and introduce our panelists and then I'll let them kind of introduce themselves. So on the phone here we have Megan. Megan, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, perfect. Megan Pierce, and she's an instructor of psychology and a postdoctoral scholar at Harvard Medical School and with the VA. And then we have Jeremy Hauska, is that correct? All right, and Vice President for Institutional Research Effectiveness and Design. And then we also have, let's see, Dr. Tanvian Patel, is that right? And she's a visiting assistant professor and faculty. And then also Barbara St. Pierre Schneider, research professor of nursing. Okay, so if you guys just would like to go ahead and say a little bit about yourselves and your journey, your academic journey, we can go ahead and start with you, Barbara, if you'd like.
Great. Well, good afternoon. How's everyone doing today? Great. So just to give you a little bit of my journey, so I graduated from nursing school as an undergraduate and then worked for about 1.5 years, went back and got my master's degree, which took about 2 years. And then I worked 2 years as a instructor at a university. And then I went back and got my PhD, and that took 5 years. And then after that I did 2 postdocs. One was at the same institution where I got my PhD. And the lab closed, but I also wanted to do a different area. So then I did a second postdoc. And then, so that was, the second postdoc was about 3.5 years. And then I got my first tenure track faculty position.
So I think I'm probably the closest to where you guys are probably at right now. I got my bachelor's. I'm actually a triple alumni of UNLV. Got my bachelor's here in biology, got my master's in public health, and graduated with my PhD in 2017. So I did a little bit different how I did a postdoc. I only did kind of half a semester and a summer of a postdoc, where I continued my research in my PhD, continued doing the work that I did during my PhD, published more onto that, and trained some more graduate students under me during my postdoc for that semester in the summer. And then I got into this visiting assistant professor position, which is more teaching heavy because I wanted to do more teaching and I wanted to get more experience teaching graduate level courses, because a lot of you, which you might experience this in your departments depending on where you are, you don't get a lot of teaching experience when you get into your PhD program, especially when you go and try to teach graduate level courses. And that's something that I feel like I did not get a chance to do when I was getting my PhD. And that's something I wanted to do, and it was a good opportunity that I got getting this visiting professor position, is being able to get more teaching experience. Because when you get into academia, it's not just all research. You have to be able to teach too, because it's always half teaching, half research. And that's something that I wanted to get more experience in. I had the research behind me, but I wanted to get more teaching experience. So that's the opportunity I got, and that's something that I'm really glad that I was able to get that visiting professor position, to be able to get more teaching experience behind me before I transition into a tenure faculty position, which I am now applying for and getting those secondary interviews and hopefully getting that tenure position in the next coming fall. So that's where I am in my position in my academic career.
I'm Jeremy Huska. I'm Vice President, Institutional Research, Assessment, and Effectiveness and Design. And I was finishing up my PhD here in 2010, experimental psychology. It's 8 years already, and For me, the story also, I guess is unique or had its twists and turns, if you will. I was an undergraduate at the University of Laverne in Southern California, 2002, very diverse school. Some of you are nodding, you're aware. And I wanted to have that experience as a faculty member. That was the dream, right? But I did find that to get into a master's or doctoral program, especially in psych, you have to do some research. And at that time, Laverne really didn't have the research infrastructure. So I did my master's at California State University, San Bernardino, kept it in the Inland Empire, some of you know, and came here for 5 years. And the reason I came to UNLV is I would have the opportunity to teach intro psych and statistics, research methods right away, because I wanted to get to a small liberal arts teaching school, and this was the perfect place to do it. And I also got really involved in the GPSA, so all of you who are involved, I think you're doing the right thing. Did the presidency, had some other positions, I think social chair, that was a whole lot of fun. And all of those involvements working with folks in different departments really prepared me for the job market. Working with people, different backgrounds, different interests, but all having a common goal, really to serve students and get them to graduate. So got on the job market in 2010 and got a position at Concordia University, Chicago, a very small liberal arts school, Chicago. And I was there for 3 years. I had an opportunity at Centenary University 3 years later, 45 minutes outside New York City, and finished up my tenure there, got my tenure credit, and 6 years got my tenure. But all the while, this GPSA experience really got me thinking about administration. I always wanted to lead and work with others and really have an impact, like we did with the GPSA. We had some of the first protests with budget cuts a while back. Some of you remember this, about 10 years ago. And that led me to Director of Institutional Research and Assessment, which is really statistically based, using data for analytics and decision making. And then recently, I was moved to the President's Cabinet and Vice President. Who knows where I'll go, but that was all because I wanted to be a tenure track professor. So I guess my point is, you never know where you're going to end up. Just keep building the skills and looking out for opportunities and put yourself out there and take it.
Great, thank you. And Megan, would you like to go ahead and give us your background?
Sure. So I did my undergraduate degree in psychology at UNLV. And then I went on for my master's degree in counselor education, my master's degree in psychology for experimental psychology, and then my doctorate in experimental psychology, all at UNLV. I also was very involved in the GPSA and leadership on campus throughout my entire graduate school program. With the Student Organization of Addiction Professionals and Master of Counseling program, and then the GPSA throughout my doctoral program. I went on the job market. I graduated May of 2017, so I went on the job market around the fall 2016 session, because that's typically when you see a lot of faculty jobs coming up. It wasn't until the Board of Regents meeting in the spring that I applied to my postdoc. It was a spur of the moment thing. A friend gave me a link to check out the postdoc program. The application was due in 2 days, so I figured why not throw my hat in and see what happens. And then within 2 weeks, I had secured the postdoc position through Harvard University and Judge Baker's Children's Hospital, where I began when I moved to Boston the summer afterwards and began doing research with the Boston VA. Unfortunately, about a month into my postdoc program, I found out that NIH had cut funding to the program, which had been around for 36 years, and that I would have to find another postdoc as soon as that year ended, which worked out perfectly because I began still doing research with the Boston VA. I'm currently postdoc with the Boston VA, but then I was kind of forced to go up for promotion at Harvard Medical School, which I just recently did, and so now I'm an instructor in psychiatry there. I'm still teaching at UNLV. It's very hard in postdoc programs to get teaching experience. It's something that the postdoc associations are working on out here in the Northeast to try to get teaching positions for postdocs, but if you do want to go to an academic position, it's incredibly important to keep that teaching aspect. So I'm still teaching at UNLV, and I'm also TAing with Harvard Extension School. And yeah, that's kind of my journey.
All right, perfect. And did you all want to open it up for questions from the audience first, or talk a little first?
You can open it up.
All right, cool. So if you guys have any questions.
I'm almost done with my PhD program, and I'm interested to know what strategies did you use to find a tenure track job, or what did help you best to find a job as soon as possible?
I could probably tell you right now, since I'm kind of in the middle of it too, or was early, since, so the best strategy that you can use is the websites that are the best to use for that is higher ed jobs. That's going to be the best one. There's also Chronicle, which that one I feel like is harder to navigate. I felt higher ed is the best because they actually filter it by the actual degree that you're getting. The filter system is a lot better for that, and they're updated every single day. And they're filtered by exactly what degree you're getting. So every day it's there, the criteria is there, what exactly the posting you're supposed to, what the school is looking for, what documents you need to submit, what the key thing you want to look for when you're going to apply for those jobs, you want to see when the review process is going to start. And you want to submit your application before that review starts. If you submit that application after their review date, you're not going to get your best chance of getting looked at first. If you submit your application after their review date, they're probably not going to look at you at all. Your best chance is to submit it. So if that review date for them says they're going to start screening those applications November 1st, you want to submit that as soon as possible. If you submit it after November 1st, your chances go down by 50%. That they're probably just going to not even look at you. Unless that application pool is really bad, that first round that they submitted. So those are the two best websites for looking at faculty positions.
And definitely set up your email notifications. Higher ed jobs will do that, so you can also get crafty with it if you're a tweener like I was. If you're looking to teach at liberal arts baccalaureate schools, you can set up filters and get your postings for that. Or if you're thinking master's level, which was probably my ceiling, that's what I did with both of them. So maybe that's a strategy too, besides those two sites. So you stay on top of everything.
So I actually leveraged my relationship with my postdoc mentor. So he had his own network, and so he knew when I was ready to look for a tenure track position. So he talked to his colleagues and helped me find the right, or some options for a tenure track position.
And is it true that you cannot get a tenure track position from the university that you are graduated from?
No, that is not true. We have plenty of people in our own department that they hired internally. So it just depends on what you can offer that department. If you can stand out and bring something that's unique, your research that makes you stand out, that's different from what's already that someone else is doing, you can get hired internally. It's not like it's completely disqualifies you. I know a lot of departments don't like that, but our own department, we actually have a few of our PhDs that we graduated that are now tenure track faculty that are internally graduates. So it's not, that disqualifies you. It's just if you can stand out from that.
Megan, would you like to add anything to that about what your advice is for getting a tenure track position after finishing your PhD?
So I would say just be very vigilant and check several times a day, because you don't know when job postings are going to be going up. I stuck mostly to Chronicle and higher ed, But there are also, depending on your degree, there's also other sites, like for psychology, there's like the Psychology Job Wiki, where people update job postings, but they also update what part of the search they're in. So sometimes faculty members from those schools will go on and let you know if a search has failed, or let you know how far they are in the search and what they're doing, so you know if you did miss out on that, or you do still have a chance. So I would just say be pretty obsessive and just keep Googling things, because you never know what you're going to find if your area of expertise does have something like that that is consistently updated. But yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Does anybody else have a question for the panel?
Oh, there's actually one more thing I wanted to add.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So there's another strategy that I didn't mention, is if you're looking for a specific group that you want to, like if you want to work for the UC system, you want to work for the Cal State system, you want to work for Emory, they actually have internal ones that they will post that are not posted in higher ed, and they're not posted on the Chronicles. So Emory will actually post in their Emory portal system that they don't post on higher ed as well, that I've seen. And the UC systems will also post through the UC job portals as well. If you're looking that you want to work in the Cal State system and you want to work in the UC systems, because they will have research professor tenure track only, where you're just doing research and you're not teaching. So they do have those ones internally as well that they'll post.
Yeah, one of the themes I'm hearing is the internal networks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also with your postdoc professors, also think about when your conferences are timed too, because if they coincide with some of the searches, sometimes you'll get some other intel, or even as Megan noted about the Psych Jobs Wiki, if you're really wanting this job and you haven't heard anything, and then you see the 4 finalists have been invited out, you better, think about another position, or if you maybe get contacted later. But all of these informal channels will probably be your consistent plan too.
Okay, one question that we had before we open it back up to the floor was, what exactly is a postdoctoral scholar, and what are the benefits to pursuing this position after you finish your doctoral degree? So we can, Megan, would you like to start with you, and then we can kind of go down with our...
Sure. So a postdoc can be anything. It depends on your area of research. But typically a postdoc is a kind of bridge between a faculty position and graduate school, where you get more experience doing some sort of research. Sometimes it's a new methodology that you haven't used before. And you basically do research for a couple of years, boost your publications, learn that new methodology, make some new connections, and then hopefully transition into a faculty position. Out here, most of our postdocs are research heavy, with absolutely no teaching, but there are postdoc positions out there that are a mix of both.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I can just say quickly, since I didn't do the postdoc, there were teaching fellowships, as Megan alluded to, I think that are important, because for me, a postdoc wouldn't have gotten me to where I wanted to be. More publications, more rec letters, weren't necessarily going to get me to a small liberal arts college where I could start teaching and earn tenure. So there are the teaching fellowships, like if you're in a program right now or have a mentor that doesn't want you teaching so much, or your GA-ship is more research, that's an option. And again, it's to get those different classes. If you're trying to do what I did, trying to get different classes on your CV, so when you're applying for jobs, people can say, oh yeah, well, she can cover half the curriculum, or he fits that niche after so-and-so retires. So I think that's important. I'll play playful devil's advocate here. And you've heard some of the benefits. I'm sure you'll hear some more of the benefits from those who had postdocs. The very practical benefit is if you're on the job market and it just doesn't seem viable, you're not getting any bites, that might be a good option to build up your record and spend some time and then hit it again. I've had some colleagues that have done that and have been successful.
Yeah, I mean, my postdoc was very small and very short. It wasn't as long as Megan's and most people's were. It was brief training to kind of enhance what I've already learned. It was very short, just to kind of add on to what I already knew and to increase my publications. Before I got this, and I kind of consider the visiting position as an extension of my postdoc into the extension of the teaching that I lacked, because I had 10 plus years of research. I started my research when I was an undergrad, and I've been doing research since I was an undergrad. So I had extensive abstracts and publications and presentations since I was an undergrad, but I never had the teaching. And so I kind of consider the visiting position as an extension of my postdoc, adding on to that piece that I was missing, which was the teaching part. And that's where I think a postdoc can be anything that you make it. It can be anything that you want to make it. It doesn't have to be defined as research itself. You can make it whatever you want to make it. You can call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be defined specifically as what we traditionally want to define it as.
So I was somewhat strategic with my postdoc period. So I graduated with my PhD from UCLA, and I wanted to stay in LA to get my dissertation papers published and use that opportunity to find a postdoc position at UCLA. So I went into neuroimmunology, and through the help of another faculty member found this position. So with that, I was able to get my papers written, but also learn some new research skills that I didn't already have. And then, so this is a long time ago when there was an earthquake in LA, and I'm like, if I'm gonna stay here. But at the same time, there was a muscle immunologist who was starting a lab at Penn State. And I thought, well, this may be a good time for me to go back to muscle immunology, because that's where I started with my PhD. And so I went out to meet with him to talk about the possibility, and he said, well, I'll give you a postdoc position for 1 year, but after that, you have to fund your own position. So I started writing an NIH NRSA fellowship, and I went over there, got my first year, and I also got the fellowship. So then I had 3 good years of funding, and which was great about that was because I planned my own study, I had a lot of independence, I had funds to support my research, and it helped kickstart my track record in terms of grant funding. So even though I stayed a little bit longer than I thought I was going to for a postdoc, in the end it helped me establish that research grant record, but also to refine and polish my research skills.
Okay, great. Did anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I know, like a friend was telling me, doing a postdoc really doesn't really pay you much, and so you were saying, hey, you need to consider what your expectations are. So what is the take in terms of a postdoc and in terms of making a living during that time, so that you can really kind of like amend yourself before you finally get into where you feel you want to be? Like, so how is it like? Because someone told me it's the pace, it's like it could be from 35,000 to 40,000 or so, which sometimes I was thinking, how are you surviving? Is it like a GA?
So UNLV has opened up a office for postdoctoral affairs, I think that's the name of it.
Okay.
And so I sit on part of that panel. And you're right, we've heard that story that some postdocs can barely eat because they don't get paid enough. However, so HR here has a pay scale for postdocs, and the highest level is 50, 55. So it doesn't have to be at that low end. So if you have the skill set that, especially going to a project that is funded, then there's a good chance that, it's definitely, it's not the same as if you were a faculty member, but, you might be a little bit better than at the lower end, and you're getting that experience. And, you really use that as an opportunity to broaden your network, get your publications, and maybe it's just for a short period of time. I know in the sciences, sometimes people do postdocs for 7 years because it's that difficult to find a position, a faculty position. But as we've said, it can be flexible, and you can make it the way that you want it.
Did you guys have anything to add to that? Or Megan, did you have anything to add to that?
Pretty much the range.
Sure. So typically postdoc will be at the NIH minimum. If you do go to locations like Boston or hopefully Northern California, there will be some leverage for cost of living increases. So while yes, it is kind of between the grad assistant and a faculty position, you can make it work, and there is room for negotiation. So like currently I'm tenure track at Harvard Medical, but still a postdoc. But you can use things like that to leverage your pay, and also you're going to want to apply for grants. You can also use that to supplement your income to make the postdoc more livable.
Awesome, thank you. Did anyone else have a question?
I do.
Yes.
Hi, I'm graduating in May, and I'm hoping to go for a postdoc after my graduation. I'm wondering, like, we did talk about the sites to find a faculty position, but are there any specific site where we can find postdoc openings, or what is the basic strategy you find postdoc?
I mean, at least from my area, the PsychWiki that was mentioned earlier did have postdoc postings. Sometimes our associations will have like a wiki or a job board, Association for Psychological Science or whomever. Also the internal channels also will, depending on someone's grant or what have you, is probably worth pursuing, but I'm sure you guys have some suggestions too.
So Sharuna, I've seen a lot of them on the Emory website. I don't know if you've checked through the Emory portal. There's there. The Chronicles website has a lot of postdocs on there. You guys, if you don't know, but LinkedIn Jobs actually has a lot of postdocs on there. I know it's not like the best, and you have to filter through them because a lot of them have the old postings, but they do have a lot of postdocs that are posted on LinkedIn Jobs. And it's one of those ones that you do have to do a little bit of work on it, but LinkedIn does have some academic postings, and they do have postdocs from some of the private sectors too that are looking for fellowships and postdocs that they will hire too. And some of those you can get a little bit more pay because they are private postdocs, so they will pay a little bit more compared to the academic ones.
Another really great thing to do, if there's somebody that you do want to work with, don't be afraid to reach out to them and ask them if they do have a postdoctoral position. Do that early too, because if they don't have something, you guys can work on a grant together, like NRSA for postdoctoral, P32, that you can work on to write a grant for you to work with that person, so that you can secure that funding for at least 2 years to do that fellowship. So don't be afraid to ask questions and try to get out there if you do want to really work with someone.
Awesome, great. Any other questions? Yeah.
I had a quick question. And you all may not know this, but during your postdoc, do you know that they defer student loans, or is that you start paying back already when you graduate, or like, because I know you're not making as much during postdoc. I was just curious if you happen to know.
I believe that there is deferment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What is a deferment for postdoc?
Well, if you have student loans, I believe that there can be a deferment. It depends on the loan itself, but
Yeah.
there could be some language that says if you're, continuing on your training,
Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead, Megan. Yeah.
So this is something I know a lot about. So in 6 months after you finish your graduate program, you will need to either apply for deferment or start paying your loans back. if you go onto the studentloan.gov website, you can apply for something like income-based repayment plans, and depending on what you make, those could be zero. So they really do base it off of your actual wages, and when you first start off as a postdoc, they base it on your wages the prior year. So they're going to base it on what you were making as a GA. So that makes the transition a little easier, and then you have to reapply for that every year. But it keeps it very, very low, usually under $300 a month, which is not, nothing. It's not a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's better than what they tell you you're going to have to pay, which typically is a large amount of money. They also do have, if you're working for a nonprofit agency or some kind of government agency, they do have other programs that you can apply for to reduce that payment plan, and then you would only have to pay for 10 years. NIH also has something called the loan repayment plan. So when you do start your job, if it's a research, it has to be a research job, but they will, if you are approved for it, they'll pay up to, I think, $52,000 towards your loan. So it's something to look into.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else? Any questions?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I think some mentioned that their bachelor's was different from their master's, and or maybe their master's was different than their PhD. Can you just talk about that process? Because I made that decision and I plan to do that for my PhD too. There's a reason behind it, but I just kind of wanted to ask about the learning curve. I mean, I knew I would constantly feel behind, but I can only imagine in PhD it might be even tougher. So I just kind of wanted to ask your experience and how that transition worked for you.
So my bachelor's was different from my master's.
Right.
My bachelor's was biology and my
public health.
master's was public health. The thing about my master's was I still got to keep my aspects of my biology because a lot of people don't know what public health is, the fact that we're able to still do the hard sciences in public health. So I still got to do the hard science in it, but I got to put more of the health part into it. So it was actually an easier learning curve for me. I felt like it was an easy transition. I had no difficulty at all going from hard science into more of looking at the social aspect of everything, combining the science and the social part of it. So I do not regret it at all. I thought it was very interesting. And then going from master's to PhD, that was definitely a hard writing, because when you go from science to writing papers, that was definitely a different transition, because you never write papers when you're in the sciences ever. You just write science and reports. You never write 10-page research papers or 20-page research papers. And that was something I struggled with, is learning APA style and research and summarizing and not plagiarizing and things like that. So that was something I really struggled with. And, I took full advantage of the Writing Center. I never stepped foot in the Writing Center when I was an undergrad, but in the master's and the PhD program, I went there a lot and really took advantage of all the resources we had here on campus. And went to my professors and asked them for really harsh critiques, like write all over it, but use all the red pens you need to really give me really good feedback so I can be a better writer.
And I think some of those themes are common too. When I was a psychology professor teaching different types of regression and modeling, and now I'm talking about percentages and mean differences and medians to a bunch of administrators and faculty, right? A little different, right? But I think the big thing is, if you're willing to put in the work and thicken skin and ask for real actionable feedback, ask for clarity on what you can do better, I think anybody in here, if they want it enough, can make that type of transition. So stick with it.
Did you have anything to add?
Well, the transition I made was from a PhD in nursing to a postdoc in neuroimmunology. And while it wasn't making a transition within a program, it was a totally different area. And so the PI was knew that I was coming in with a different background, but it didn't, it took a few months for me to get up to speed, but, the work ethic that you have as good students, as great students, and your perseverance and your love for learning, that will carry you forward.
Megan, did you have anything to add on that?
Not really. My transition was pretty linear.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other questions in the audience?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in talking about that, coming from multiple fields, which I'm also, so when it comes to the application, where do you really feel it's right to channel to? Is it a previous background or a current background, maybe in terms like you did your PhD in public health and you had your master's in biology and maybe a bachelor's in even English or something like that. So it's like you're all over the place. So where do you want to focus in terms of postdoc? Like, do you line with the PhD that you got, or you want to go back to where you got your master's in, or maybe even?
It's what you want to do. It's what your ultimate goal is. What you want to be. That's your roadmap in terms of your next step. So what do you love? What do you see yourself doing in 2-3 years? What kind of differences do you want to make?
And I was just going to say, as we're thinking about these types of themes and really what speaks to you and your journey, I think got to write it down, because obviously you can mine a lot of that for your cover letter, your teaching philosophy, and a lot of the statements that institutions are wanting to see now. So maybe one of those good old weekends, if you're old school, write it down or type it out and try to really think about this journey. Ultimately, what do you want to do? And where are you currently? Are you on that right path? What do you still need to get? How have the 7 majors that you had, at least for a quarter or a semester, shaped you to where you're going? And of course, when you do write these cover letters and statements, that's really where you can convey this in such a way that it's not just spitting back your CV. So yeah, think about it. I mean, never too early to start thinking about your big picture.
Speaking on that, do not be afraid to ask your mentors for cover letters. Do not be afraid to ask them for CVs and examples. I know a lot of you guys probably have no idea what a teaching statement looks like, what a research statement looks like, what a proper CV looks like, what a proper cover letter looks like. But that is something that all of these applications are going to ask for. I'm telling you right now, they're all going to want a research statement. They're all going to want a teaching statement. They're all going to want diversity statements now. They're all going to want cover letters. And do not be afraid to go to the chair, go to the search committee and ask them for examples. Like, I know you guys did searches. Can you give me an example of an applicant that had a great teaching statement or had a great cover letter so I can look at that? Because that is something that you're gonna have to submit for faculty positions if you're trying to apply for tenure. And you wanna be that best candidate. You wanna have the best cover letter. And ask them to review yours. And ask them for examples or to even look over your CV. So that way you can make sure the one that you're submitting is gonna be the best that's gonna be there. That's gonna have no errors, that it sounds correct, that you're hitting all those points that they want on that cover letter. Because that's the first thing that all of these search committees that they're looking at, they're gonna look at your cover letter first to see if you're gonna be that person they're gonna push through. So, and that's something that I've done when I've applied for positions, and the positions I'm applying for now is I've asked all my mentors and I've asked the senior faculties, people that have been on search committees, can you review my CV? Can you review my cover letter? Am I hitting all these points that I should be for these jobs? Get feedback from them. And they're always there to help you. The faculty are there to help you because they want their students to succeed. They want their students to get positions and say, my student's there working at Harvard, my student's there working at California, they're there working in Colorado. So.
We actually have a question about mentoring, and Megan, maybe we can start with you on this one, and then we'll kind of go down the row for our in-person panel here. So, when looking for a mentor, what is the most important factor to consider, and how is having a mentor at the different stages we've been discussing helpful and different at these stages? So during being a doctoral student, postdoctoral scholar, and faculty member.
I think the biggest thing is to make sure your mentor is someone you get along with, that you have personalities that don't clash. You're not going to want to be best friends with your mentor, but you're going to want to have that person, someone you can go to and ask questions, that you can trust to give you the best guidance, that really cares and is invested in your development. That person doesn't even have to have the exact same research interests as you. As a postdoc, you're going into these positions where you're trying to build your own research program. So your research interests are going to differ somewhat substantially because you're trying to become an independent investigator. So you really want to look at that person as more of a kind of a guider in developing these things and a collaborator. When you're in graduate school, you want your mentor to be someone who can help you develop those projects and someone you can work with to learn more about what you're doing. And there's an aspect of that in your postdoctoral work, where especially if you're learning a new methodology. But you really do want that independence once you get past grad school, to be able to develop that research program. However, in grad school, it is very important to develop your own research story so that if you can go on the job market and get yourself a tenure track position right after grad school, you can be that independent investigator. But there's a little difference in that personality there. And also make sure that, when you're looking at a postdoc position, that you have a pretty good idea of what you want to do with your career, so that you can ask those pointed questions and find someone who can take you to where you want to be, or at least guide you there.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, I think I have slightly different suggestions based on what stage you're looking at. So as a doctoral student, I think if we're going to go for one factor, I would just say, does your mentor understand you? Did they listen to what you want to do? Do they understand where you want to go? Do they understand what you need to get to that next level? And the only way you do that is through communication, through clarity. Speaking directly, check-ins every week, find your way to do that. Make sure he or she understands, because I think far too often, and I say this playfully, if you've seen PhD comics, often you'll see graduate students that are basically clones of their mentors, right? And if you want to be a clone of your mentor, that's just fine. But for me, my experience was, I was this guy who came in with a master's. I knew I wanted to be a liberal arts teaching professor who oversaw student research. And I was kind of in the middle between two different research areas, social and cognitive science. And my mentor, fortunately, David Copeland, give him a shout out here, he understood what I wanted to do and he supported it. And so I think that understanding is important, but when you're a faculty member, I think the same thing. As long as you have clarity and that open communication with multiple senior faculty, just so you can get lots of feedback. How am I doing? Am I on the right track with research and service? Am I navigating political minefields? And I think basically the big theme is communicate and get that clarity with the people you work with at any stage.
Yeah, kind of same lines there too. I think when I was a doctoral student, my overall goal was to select a mentor that listened to what I wanted to do and not tell me what he wanted me to do, but asked me, what project are you interested in? This is, he told me, this is my area of expertise. This is what I can train you in. What are you interested in? And does it align with what I can help you and train you in? And we met every week. We had a designated time every week that we met, never canceled. And every week I came with questions and he was able to answer it. She trained me and left me to do my research. I came with my own questions, I developed my own project, he mentored me, he trained me, and I was left to do the project myself. There was no micromanaging, which is something that I know a lot of people that I've interacted with had problems where their mentors would micromanage them. Every day they would want to have an update about every single aspect of the project, and that's not what you want. You don't want to micromanage. You don't want a mentor that would micromanage every single thing you're doing, because you want to develop your own project. You want to learn from the mistakes. You want to come and ask them questions if you have a problem, not have them nitpick at everything you're doing. And that's what I think is important when you select a mentor, someone that's going to help develop your projects, help you learn the aspects of it, but not micromanage it. And with the faculty, what I'm learning now as a faculty member, being an visiting assistant professor, is having a senior mentor, having someone to help me manage the bureaucracy of being a faculty member, which is something when you get into being a faculty member you'll have to also navigate through as a junior faculty, is learning the bureaucracy to manage that as well, and getting the training, collaborating on projects together, being able to develop projects and develop grants, things like that. So that's important too, is selecting a mentor to help you through that process.
So of course, I'm old enough to have been on both sides of being a mentee at each of these different stages, and now having been a mentor for others at different stages. And I think to add to what has already been said, I think one of the key things is understanding your values and those of what you want from a mentor. Because if you are on a different page in terms of values from your mentor, then it will be a challenging relationship at any stage. So for example, if your mentor is all about publications and getting grants, but you don't see yourself doing that, then maybe that's not the best fit. So those are things to think about. If I think about it from a developmental stage, I think as a doctoral student, you heavily depend upon your mentor. In many cases, your mentor will provide those resources for you. I can remember that my mentor, I had questions about how should I think about this? How should I feel about this? If this doesn't work, what do I do? And one of his famous lines was, well, you just paint a different target. You just pick yourself up and you find something else. As a postdoctoral scholar, I think the mentor provides opportunity and resources. Maybe at the beginning you don't have a grant, but then as you progress as a postdoc, then you get your own grant. But then the mentor is not standing over you like as if you're a doctoral student, that you have more independence. But then along the lines there, you have to be able to go to the mentor and say, I'm struggling with this. What do you think about this? How do I work this out? And then sharing, the mentor should share those lessons learned still at the postdoctoral level. And then as a faculty member, because I have mentored new faculty, again, it's lessons learned. I want to share with that new faculty member those things that I had to learn the hard way so that that person doesn't have to make those same mistakes. And also opening up connections. So I serve as a senior mentor here for new UNLV faculty. So I have a history here at UNLV, and I know how the system works, and I have colleagues in different departments in different areas, so I can help make those connections for that faculty member. And then just being available to answer questions or serve as a resource. You never know, a senior faculty member can help you. Any question that you have, you never know that there may be some help that even someone from a different background can help you with.
Great, thank you. Did anyone have a question? Yes, go ahead.
How do you share your publications with your mentor?
Like authorship wise, or?
Yes.
What I did first is that's something I just kind of blatantly asked the question, how do you want to do authorship? I feel like that's something that's really scary for a lot of grad students, is to ask that question, but that's something that you have to really just lay out there on the table before you even get started on the project, is how do you want to share the authorship? Who should be on your paper? Do you want all of your committee members on there? Who should be on there, and how do you want the order to be? And that's something that I wanted to really kind of get out of the way before there was any issues in the future. And that's something I did right from the beginning, before we even started the experimental process, before I even started writing the paper, is I went and asked my mentor, because I felt really comfortable. I took classes with my faculty mentor before I selected that person to do the project with when I was in my master's. So I felt like I felt comfortable enough to ask my mentor from the beginning, who should be the first author and how should this author order be? And
But for sure, their name should appear in your publications, right?
It should, if they put enough effort into it. And that's something that even when you submit to a journal, they ask you for that information. A lot of journals ask you the level of effort that every author puts in there. They usually do. And that's something you have to justify in a lot of the submissions too. But yeah, I mean, if they didn't, usually if they put in the effort, they should be in there. Your mentor should be on your publication. I mean, I really haven't seen anyone that doesn't put their mentor on there if they didn't put any.
I think many associations have guidelines for identifying authorship. Also, the International Council, I think, for Medical Editors has some guidelines that, and there are many articles that have been written about authorship and who deserves authorship. But I definitely think it's one of those things that you need to talk about up front, even if you're considering a postdoc position. That's something that's part of the sort of interview process. How do you assign authorship? What guidelines do you use? What kinds of projects would I be a first author on, a second author, things like that? It's an important question to ask early on.
Megan, would you like to chime in on that one also, about the authorship? Megan?
Yeah, sorry, my phone timed out. I agree with everyone there. I think just being open and having someone you can talk to about that is very important, especially before you start a project. Also, a good thing to do is to look at, if you're choosing a mentor, before you even get to that, look at their publication history. A lot of labs do have websites that list their current lab members, and see if they do have first author publications and they are leading studies, and then use that to go into your interviews and say how does your lab usually handle publication before you even get in that position.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask if you are more interested in the teaching route, and you do go for your PhD, depending on the field, or I don't know if there's a general rule of thumb, like how often we should be publishing research, because I can only imagine, like right now I'm not even doing research, but I'm juggling classes and teaching. I'm teaching 4 classes and taking 3, so I can only imagine juggling research with teaching and whatever else may come. So I was going to ask, is there like a certain number of publications that we should aim for each year while balancing that load?
Well, I would probably say it's really the norms of your research area and your discipline. You can draw a lot of the inferences, I think, on job interviews, right? I was interviewing for a lot of 3-3 and 4-4 teaching loads.
Yeah.
And as that increases, let's say you're going to go to a community college with 5-5s. There's not enough time to necessarily pump out 1 or 2 publications a year. So I think one way to answer that question might be the places that you're interviewing at or you're interested in, look at the new or recently tenured associate professors and see kind of what they did every year and get a sense for okay, they're pumping out this many a year. Is that feasible with the teaching load? And, you know, start having those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You can even find out what their teaching load is. A lot of that information is on the school's websites. You can find out what their, they have bylaws on there, and their bylaws and their information is there. It'll say if they're a 2-2 teaching load, if they're a 3-3 teaching load, if they're more research heavy, if they're more teaching heavy. Some of these, even the postings that are there for the jobs will give a description if they're more research heavy, if they're more teaching heavy.
Okay.
So it just depends on the institution that you're applying for. You know, it all just depends on what you're looking for yourself.
Okay,
Yeah.
they were having conversations like that in seminar, but I'm like, okay, but how do I know, you know? So
You just have
that
to,
makes sense. Do
yeah,
the
you just have
research.
to you just have to look, and it
Mhm.
just depends on the institution you're trying to get the position in. And, you know, every institution's a little different.
Thanks.
Megan or Barbara, any final comments on that one?
No, I think that's well covered, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right, did anyone else have any questions? I have one here. So let's see here. In all of your personal experiences, what are one of the best ways to manage the work-life balance while going through these different stages? So as a doctoral student, postdoctoral scholar, and as a faculty member. So ways to manage that work-life balance. And Megan, would you like to go ahead and start with that one?
Sure. So as a doctoral student, I had not much of one. Being GPSA president my last year in my doctoral program, and teaching and research and whatnot, I would say just make sure you're doing self-care. So something I really liked to do when I was a doctoral student was brew beer, which I could easily do on a Sunday while writing. And then going to the gym, just being healthy and eating right, that really does help get your head into a better place. As a postdoc, I have to say it was a very big culture shock. I came from, working 100 hours a week to being told, you're doing research only now, so you're working 40 hours a week, and then not knowing what to do with the rest of my time. And that's not true with every postdoc. Since then, I started teaching and then doing leadership, so I'm slowly getting myself into the same position of working 100 hours a week, which is kind of self-care for me. But I would say, especially when you're in your postdoc position, taking that time to say, you know what, I do need to take the weekends off, and I will work, even if you have to work 12-hour days during the week, being able to take time off for yourself and to do things that you want to do, that's going to be the most important. It does get better. Being a grad student was tough. But, if you do go into a position where you're only your research, and you're not working several jobs as a grad student, it will seem a little better. However, I know that once you get into that faculty position, it changes once again. So just enjoy the process and take care of yourself.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm still learning about that work-life balance. I think we're trained very well as graduate students to be busy bees and work lots of hours and be worried about our productivity and be guilty when we sometimes take a break. So I'll be honest, if I can take one day of the weekend to engage in serious leisure, I enjoy it. I DJ and produce music on the side, and not saying it's any good, or the kombucha that I brew, probably not really good either, but I enjoy it because I think it's important to get outside of yourself and away from everything you're doing, because realistically, some research suggests that you have 4 to 5 just key peak hours, and when you know when that is, if it's morning or night, use that for your tasks and just kill it. And then do some of the, the grading or some of the menial stuff later. So I think for me, balancing, my peak hours and peak activity has been helpful. And I would also say, as a doctoral student, the thing that really helped me with work-life balance was, getting in here. Obviously, we were in the other location when I was around, but getting in here and getting outside of yourself, because I think many of you who are in different areas are struggling with the same things, are enlightened about the same things, and are going through many of the same experiences. So just talking with others and maybe getting some pearls of wisdom and supporting one another, I think really helps with the work-life balance too.
Yeah, I think self-care is important. When I was a doctoral student, I made it a habit that I took every Saturday night off. I did not look at anything. I went out, I went to the movies, went out with my friends, went to the bars, just kind of did nothing. I didn't want to look at my dissertation. I didn't want to look at anything. I made it a habit where Saturdays were the days that I did nothing, just so I didn't get burnt out. And one thing that maybe some of you guys could not do, but something that really, really helped me is before I defended my dissertation, I took a vacation the week before I defended my dissertation. I went to Mexico. I relaxed on the beach, did not look at my dissertation at all, did not want to look at it, and then I came back and I defended. And I think that really, really helped a lot because it really calmed me down, it relaxed me, it just kind of having that peace of mind and not being so stressed before you defend anything, a thesis, a dissertation, it really helped. And it really, I went up there and I realized that nobody knew this better than me. And, and that's it. And I think that really was a good stress reliever. It really helped that work-life balance for me, is to just take little breaks like that. And even, I know it sounded crazy to take a break like right before you defended, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to just get away from it for a couple days and not look at it. So, and I think that's one of those pieces of advice I give to any of the PhD students, master's students that I come across. Take a couple days off if you need to, right before you defend, so you're not looking at it, so it relaxes you, just so you don't stress before you go up there.
So I can remember when I was a PhD student, it was a weekend. I was running a Western blot, which takes a long period of time, but there's like a 3-hour incubation period. So a couple of us decided, because we were right near Westwood, where the movie theaters are, so we decided, let's go see a movie. And so that was our fun for the day, and we came back and finished our blot. I think understanding how your work flows, in my career, it's kind of been like a cycle where, it's focus, 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 and then there's a stopping point. And then I can breathe and relax, and so that's sort of my, I hit that milestone, and now I can relax a little bit, and then it's going to ramp up again. So I think understanding how your work, how your field is, and planning, scheduling fun times. I did the same thing too, where Saturday night, I didn't do anything. I cooked something fun. I like to cook, and so I would cook something different to kind of get away from thinking about science. But I'll admit, I actually love my work, but then I think about it in different ways at different times, so that I'm not always hunched over the computer working at it. But if I want to think about an idea, or just dream about, well, what if this, and that kind of helps me deal with some of the pressure associated with some of the details of the job. And as an older person, and I have a family, I always think about that the work that I'm doing is supporting my family, and that, yes, I can't pick up my son from school every day, but I'm making sure that he's having a good life by doing the work that I'm doing.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Questions? I have one more here. How would you describe the transition from master's to a doctoral program? How are those transitions different from, say, high school to college, or starting an undergraduate to master's program? And we'll go ahead and start with Barbara, and we'll just kind of work our way back down, and with you, Megan.
So I think as it was said earlier, it's a huge difference going from a master's to a doctoral program. And I still remember that first semester of the doctoral program. It was like, I need to read a book every week and then talk about it for 3 hours in front of 12 people. That was one course. Another course was, a pile of articles and have all that read on the same day, because we only met once a week and we had 2 classes that same day. And I was like, how am I, and then there was a big assignment at the end, so it wasn't like there were no exams. It was talk, read, and at the end you write this paper and it's supposed to be, publishable and all this, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna get through this? So yeah, this was at UCLA, so it was quarters. So the first quarter was a little rough, and then when I decided that I got through the first quarter, I'm like, it got easier after that. I knew, because I kind of knew how it worked, and so I could, okay, well, I don't need to read all this now. I can catch up on it later, and so I could plan things a little differently. But it's a huge difference. But it's also fun because you can think differently and you can share things, and it's exchanging ideas, and it's thinking at that higher level. So it was better than being in a master's program, even though it was much more work.
I think it was a little bit harder. You're kind of put into a different category than what you were in your master's. You start with your undergrad where it's a huge group, and then you go to your master's, it's kind of sectioned off, and then you go to a PhD, now you're in a little bit smaller group. Your expectation, what you're expected is a little higher, it's a lot higher now. You're put in a different category, you're expected a lot more from your mentors, from the faculty. You're put on a different level. The quality of work that you're supposed to produce is a lot higher than what you are supposed to have when you're in the master's level now. Your thinking process is a lot more. Now you have to worry about comp exams that you didn't have to worry about when you were in the master's program. Worrying about dissertation, the project is a little more detailed than what your master's project would have been. I felt like the doctoral degree was a lot harder than the master's degree because the level of thinking was a lot harder. Now I have to come up. My master's project was something that was kind of laid out to me because it was a project where a company paid me to do this. It was sponsored by an outside company. It was kind of laid out. They're like, test this product for us, and this is what you're gonna do, and we're gonna pay you to do it. So that's what it was laid out. But my doctoral project was something that I had to create from scratch, and it was a level of difficulty that I never really had to think about. And it was, questions and training and things that I never really thought about. So the difficulty was definitely tenfold than what I expected from when I had my master's. So it was challenging. I wanted to pull my hair out a lot, a couple of breakdowns there, but I got through it, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard the themes of intellectual rigor and more expectations, but I do think one of the things to think about is, at least at the doctoral level, you're always on. You're expected to always be on, right? What do you think? What do you have to say about that? So you're always, at any point, can be asked a question by your discussion leader, by your professors, and I think that's just really helpful as you grow and mature and become a postdoc scholar, faculty member, or administrator. And I think it's the most exciting thing. Even as an administrator, I'm flying back, I have a board of trustees meeting in the morning, and I'll be presenting, and you just never know what kind of question you're going to get. And that's very different than when you're teaching in the classroom undergrads or when you were an undergrad, right? You could be passive. You could blend into the wall, perhaps. When they ask for questions, it's Bueller, right? Folks aren't engaging. So I think as you go up, up the ladder and you all grow, just that whole level of independence and activity and just, always being on, I think, really helps the transition.
All right, and Megan?
I really agree with what everyone has said. Transitioning from a master's to a PhD program, you do have that independence, and a lot of that program is then more individualized to you because it's focused on your research, and in some cases you can tailor your what coursework you do have left for what you do want to do. And so, yeah, you are always on, and it's a great opportunity, though, to become independent and develop your own research program.
All right, awesome. Any other questions? Final questions? Last chance? No? All right, well,
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So how many of you are thinking about a postdoc, or where are you in your journey? Yeah,
I'm graduating in May and hoping to secure a postdoc.
great. In what area?
Public health.
Okay, awesome.
Second year PhD, I don't know if I'll do a postdoc,
Okay.
but I'm on the postdoc committee with you, obviously.
Yeah.
And so just learning about this process and what goes into postdocs is beneficial to me.
Good.
I just finished with my master's in May from a different school and then transferred here, so it's my first semester in the PhD program in sociology, and I actually had no idea what a postdoc was, but saw it everywhere. And
Oh,
so
good.
I appreciate the kind of detail to go in that, because yeah, I kept trying to figure out what it was. I didn't have an idea.
And even though it seems like you're just starting, it will go fly fast. I mean, there'll be days where you're
Yeah.
like, really, how much longer? But when you get done, you're like, oh my God, now what,
Yeah. So
Awesome.
glad to know what the options are.
Great. Anybody else?
I'm a second semester master's student in the higher education program, and the reason why I came here is mostly to see like how your journey started and what were your steps, because I'm actually an academic coach over at the ASC, so just trying to find out, okay, what are their steps? How can I follow in their steps in order to be successful? Because I'm thinking about going into a PhD, but I'm not sure where to start.
And did you get some ideas?
A couple.
Okay, great.
Definitely a couple.
Great.
I used to teach actually high school. I taught AP and honors English, so
Oh.
it's really interesting to hear that there is a teaching aspect to doctorate students.
Yeah, you can be straight teaching faculty. You don't have to do research at all. There are just academic teaching positions out there where you are just teaching and no real research part to it. If that's not the area you want to go and you just want to teach, there are teaching positions out there. And they have FIR positions, which are faculty and residents, and they have tenure FIR positions too, that you can get to associates and full like that as well, where it's just teaching geared,
Okay.
if that's something you want to do.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Thank you.
I'm a second year doctoral student in clinical psychology, and to me it seems like it's not even an option not to do a postdoc.
Right.
But it's nice to hear, how many options there are, and that it can be targeted towards whatever you want to do. Like it could be all research potentially, or like seeing clients and doing research at the same time. So it gives me a lot more options. It's still really far away, but nice to keep in mind. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences.
Sure.
Some areas it's an expectation, so
Yeah.
yours is one of those areas, so.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to share anything about or ask any other questions about the experience?
I have a last question to ask. So as a postdoc, am I supposed to be working on my own project, or like am I expected to work on like my mentor or whoever I work for? So what is expectation from a postdoc?
So it depends. So that's something that you make an arrangement with your mentor. So I have a postdoc in my lab right now, but I also have a DoD grant, and so she's paid off the grant, and so she does part of the grant. What I have offered to her is, she certainly can be part of publications, but that we eventually figure out what her niche is going to be after she finishes the postdoc, and that we find a way that she can work on that while she's still working with me, so that when she leaves, that she has sort of established the beginning of a research program.
So in that case, if I'm approaching to a professor and let's say I'm really interested to work with him, so am I gonna say like, this is what I want to do if you like, if I get a postdoc with you, or this is your project I'm really interested in and this is how I can contribute to your project? What should be my best strategy to approach him?
I think either one. I mean, so for my my first postdoc, I just did whatever was available. So I had the goal of learning certain skills. So the PI had a grant, so she paid me off the grant, and I did whatever experiments she wanted me to do. She gave me some opportunity to modify the experiments and add some, but she was basically running the project. Then for my second postdoc, I approached a PI and I said, I really would like to do this. So he says, well, I need you to come and set up this in my lab. So you have these skills, come and set this up, and then you can do your own project as part of this bigger project. And then I got some funding and I was able to really branch off and still be supported by him in terms of infrastructure, but that I had my own piece.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So who creates the postdoc? Is it a professor who is interested in working with someone, or it's kind of like the department or the school decides that, hey, we need this number of postdocs in the school, so we create a postdoc position?
I think it can vary. I think traditionally it's that individual faculty in their research program create these positions. Although I have heard of institutions or departments who have funded postdoc positions.
So it varies as to-
Yeah.
Megan, did you have anything else you wanted to add or share?
No, I think everyone's covered that very well.
All right. Any other final questions or last questions? No? All right. Well, let's thank our panelists for wonderful today. And just some final announcements again. If you didn't get a chance to sign in when you came in, please do so before you leave today. Sign it on our sheet right outside the door. And then also, we have the Rebel Grad Slam finals on Friday, November 2nd in the SEB lobby from 4 to 6. Rebel Grad Slam finals. So write that on your calendars. And thank you all for coming today. Have a great day. All right, thank you so much, Megan.
I'm Ryan Rabbit. So, second year PhD in criminal justice criminology.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and I grew up in Ontario, California.